I was scrolling through the comments when one caught my eye. It was a story about an elderly woman who had been left behind at a rest stop. Her family had driven off, completely forgetting about her. She sat there for hours, feeling alone and abandoned, until a kind stranger stepped in to help. The internet was outraged. How could they do that to their own mother? What kind of monsters leave a 75-year-old woman stranded? The comments were filled with anger, disbelief, and sympathy. And as I sat, in the same gas station where that story had been posted, my blood ran cold. I wasn't just reading someone else's tragedy. I was living it. 3 days ago, my own son and his family had left me, in this very place. They had driven away without a second thought, leaving me behind. What they didn't know, though, was that I wasn't just some helpless old woman they could easily discard. I still held the deed to the house they thought they owned. Let me take you back. Let me show you how I went from feeling like a roadside victim to the one holding all the cards. It started 6 months ago, when my son David called me. His voice was shaky, filled with panic. "Mom, we're in trouble," he said, barely able to get the words out. "Sophie lost her job, and the kids' school fees, plus the mortgage. We might lose the house." I had been living peacefully in my little retirement community in Phoenix. My days were filled with book club meetings, bridge games, and the occasional trip to visit my sister. I was 70 years old. I thought I was done with financial rescues. But hearing that desperation in David's voice, the same voice that once called me when he had scraped his knee, or was scared of the dark, I couldn't turn him away. "How much do you need?" I asked, already calculating what I could pull from my late husband's life insurance. I had been keeping it aside, just in case of emergencies. $80,000, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. That would cover the missed payments and give us a buffer. "I hate asking," he added, "but you're the only one we can turn to." The kids. Lily and Sam. They would be devastated if we had to move again. My heart sank. I had already missed too much of their childhood, living far away. The thought of them losing their home, their sense of stability. It broke me. "Don't worry, sweetheart," I said softly. "Family takes care of family." Within a week, I'd liquidated a significant part of my retirement savings, and wired the money to David. But I wasn't naive. I'd learned the hard way, from my late husband's business dealings, to always protect myself. So I had my lawyer draw up a simple agreement. The $80,000 was a loan, to be repaid within 2 years. And as collateral, I'd hold a lien on their house until it was paid back. David seemed surprised by the paperwork, but he signed it without hesitation. "Mom, you're a lifesaver. We'll have this paid back to you as soon as Sophie finds work," he promised. At the time, I thought this was just a temporary arrangement, a way to help my son's family through a tough patch. Little did I know, this would set the stage for one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. For the first few months, everything seemed fine. David called every Sunday, updating me on Sophie's job search and the kids' activities. Lily was doing great in her art classes, and Sam had made the school soccer team. They sent me pictures of family dinners and weekend outings. It felt good to know that my sacrifice was preserving their happiness. But then, the calls started coming less often. When I did manage to talk to David, he was distracted. His responses were short, like he was in a rush. Sophie, who used to chat with me, suddenly was never available when I called. One afternoon, I finally asked, "Is everything okay? You sound a little stressed." "Everything's fine, Mom," David replied quickly. "Just busy with work and the kids' activities. You know how it is." But I didn't know. I didn't feel like I was a part of their lives anymore. I was becoming a distant observer. Then came Tyler's birthday in April. I suggested coming over for the celebration, but David hesitated. "Actually, Mom, this isn't the best time. Sophie's parents are visiting, and you know how cramped the house gets. Maybe next month?" Next month came, and went, without an invitation. I asked about visiting for Lily's art show, and once again, there was another excuse. Sophie's sister was staying with them. David was traveling for work. The kids had too much homework to make a proper visit. It started to feel like I was being managed, not loved. Every conversation felt rehearsed, like David was giving me just enough information to keep me content, without letting me truly into their lives. But I pushed those thoughts aside. Surely, I was just overthinking things. They were just busy, right? Stressed about finances? The truth didn't hit me, until late May, when Lily accidentally picked up David's phone. "Grandma Helen." Lily exclaimed excitedly. "I miss you so much. When are you coming to visit?" "Daddy says you're too busy, but I want to show you my room. We painted it purple." My heart twisted. Too busy. I had no idea they had painted Lily's room, or that she was so eager to see me. Before I could say anything, I heard David in the background. "Lily, give me the phone," he said, his voice strained. "Hi, Mom," David said, his breath a little heavier now. "Sorry." Lily grabbed my phone while I was in the shower. "David," I said, trying to stay calm, "Lily seems to think I've been too busy to visit." "What have you been telling her?" There was a long pause. "Mom, it's just, you know how kids are. They mix things up." "I'm actually running late for a meeting. Can I call you back later?" he asked, already moving the conversation along. He never called back that day. Or the next. When I finally managed to reach him 3 days later, he was polite, but distant, only giving me another update on his job and Sophie's search for work. But there was nothing about the kids asking for me, nothing about the possibility of a visit. That night, I sat in my hotel room, fighting the urge to call David. But I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. There was something off, about what had just happened, about how I'd been treated, about the family I thought I was helping. And I knew, I needed answers. I called David. "Listen," I started, my voice cutting through the awkward silence between us, "I need to know the truth. Is Sophie working or not?" There was a long pause. Long enough to make my chest tighten. "Mom, what's this about?" he asked, his tone already defensive. "I lent you $80,000, believing you were in financial trouble," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But now I find out that's not the case. Sophie's been working for months. You've got a new car, a BMW in the driveway, and dinner parties? This isn't the story you told me." I could hear him shifting around on the other end of the line, trying to buy time. "Mom, it's not as simple as you think. Sophie was unemployed for a while, and we're still catching up. We never said we wouldn't pay you back." The words stung, more than I expected. Catching up? They'd lied. Lied, to my face, about their financial struggle. "You bought a new car with the money I gave you," I continued, the words burning in my throat. "You're living like you have no problem. But this isn't the family you described to me." A silence fell between us. Then, his voice, colder this time. "Mom, I don't like your tone. We're grateful for what you did, but that doesn't mean you have the right to monitor our spending or question our decisions." I felt my heart sink, a hollow feeling spreading through my chest. I wasn't his mother anymore. I wasn't a loved one. I was a creditor, a burden to be managed, avoided. I could feel the tears rising, but I swallowed them down. This wasn't about me being upset. It was about the betrayal. The lies. The manipulation. I hung up the phone, and for the first time in months, I let myself really feel what had been happening all along. David wasn't just my son. He was someone who had learned how to use me, how to exploit my love, my trust. And I had let him. But I wasn't done. I wasn't going to let it end like this. I couldn't. So, I made up my mind. I wasn't just going to sit around, waiting for an apology, or an explanation that would never come. I was going to figure out the truth. I was going to dig deeper. The next morning, I set out on a mission. I wasn't going to let them continue lying to me. I had already given them everything. I had made sacrifices for them. But now, it was time for me to reclaim what was mine. Time for me to take control. I made a quick search online, just a basic search of public records, just to see what was really going on. And it didn't take long to uncover what David and Sophie had been hiding. Sophie wasn't unemployed. She had been working at a marketing firm for months, making more money than I had been told. And that new BMW? It wasn't a necessity to help them out of financial ruin. It was a luxury purchase, made just months ago, financed by a down payment that matched my $80,000. The same money, I had been led to believe, was saving their house. That's when it hit me. I wasn't helping them out of a tough spot. I was helping them upgrade their lifestyle, while they pretended to be drowning. But I didn't stop there. I needed more answers. So I kept looking. And that's when I saw something that shook me to the core. One Sunday afternoon, I drove past David and Sophie's neighborhood. I wasn't planning to stop, just passing by. But then I saw something that made my heart lurch. There, in their front yard, were Lily and Sam. Playing. Not at birthday parties. Not at any of the activities they'd claimed kept them busy when I visited. They were right there, laughing, running around like everything was normal. It hit me like a slap in the face. David had lied to me. They had made excuses to avoid seeing me. To avoid letting me be part of their lives. And for what? To keep me in the dark, while they spent my money on things they didn't need. I parked my rental car at the end of their street, and sat there for a while, just watching. It was like everything I'd believed about my family had been a lie. I had helped them. I had sacrificed so much. And they had used me. I knew I couldn't let this go. I had to confront David. It was time to hear the truth, whether he liked it or not. That night, I called him again from my hotel room. I need to know the truth, I said. You told me you were struggling. But now I know you've been hiding things. Sophie's been working. You've bought a new car. And your story doesn't add up. I need you to tell me what's really going on. David hesitated, his voice dropping. Mom, please, you don't understand. No, you don't understand, David, I interrupted, my voice shaking. I've supported you. I've helped you. And now I'm finding out that none of it was real. Why did you lie to me? I didn't lie, Mom, David said, his voice tight with irritation. We're just still getting back on our feet. Things aren't as simple as you think. I clenched my jaw. Things aren't as simple as you think. You bought a BMW while I'm sitting here, trying to figure out how to get my money back. You think that's okay? David's tone shifted again, colder now. You can't just keep questioning everything we do. We're grateful for your help, but that doesn't give you the right to control our lives. The words hit harder than I expected. Control your lives? No, David. I've never tried to control you. But I'm not a fool, and I won't be treated like one. I'm your mother, not your ATM. The conversation ended with him promising to call me back later. But I knew, deep down, that this wasn't just a misunderstanding. I had been manipulated. And now, I had to make a choice. Would I keep fighting for my money? Or would I let them walk all over me? The drive to Colorado Springs had started so well. There was something in the air, maybe it was the thought of a fresh start, of things going back to normal. But that moment after lunch, when we sat down to talk, everything changed. Sophie leaned in, her voice low as she spoke. Helen, she said, almost as if she was about to break bad news, we've been meaning to talk to you about the loan. I set my coffee cup down carefully, trying to remain calm. What do you mean? David shifted in his seat, his eyes nervously darting between Sophie and me. Well, when you gave us that money, you knew we were struggling. But now we're back on our feet. We've got new expenses, Tyler's soccer, Lily's art classes, and the house, it's all adding up. If we pay you back $80,000 now, it'll just put us right back where we started. I stared at them both. It was as if the world had shifted beneath me. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But you signed the agreement, I replied, keeping my voice steady. We made a deal. David cut in, his tone growing defensive. That was when we were desperate, Mom. We weren't thinking clearly. Now that things are better, it doesn't make sense to go back to that. Sophie leaned in, her voice dripping with what sounded like fake concern. You don't really need that money, do you? You've got your pension, your savings. You've already given us so much. We're just starting out, Helen. You can't expect us to keep paying this back with everything we've got going on. I couldn't believe my ears. My 45-year-old son, who lived in a beautiful home and made a six-figure salary, was trying to justify his refusal to repay me, a 70-year-old widow on a fixed income. As though I was the one in the wrong. I looked at them both. You're saying that if I want you to keep your promise and pay back the money, I'm choosing money over family? I was trying to hold it together, but inside, I felt like I was being torn apart. David's voice grew sharper. Mom, we're just saying that if you keep pushing us on this, it's going to hurt our relationship. We're family. Can't you see that? I shook my head, feeling a sense of betrayal so deep, it almost took my breath away. You want me to forgive $80,000 because you need it, but I'm the one being selfish for expecting you to honor our agreement? Does that sound right to you? The silence that followed was suffocating. Sophie spoke up again, and when she did, her voice had an almost manipulative quality to it. The kids are already picking up on the tension. They know things aren't right, Helen. They know you haven't visited. They know you turned down our invitation to live with us. You've been distant. The kids think you don't want to spend time with them. I felt a cold rush in my chest. They were using my own grandchildren to manipulate me, to twist the truth, and make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. They were turning my love for Lily and Sam into a weapon. I looked out the window, watching them play on the swings. They were laughing, carefree, as if none of this was happening. I wanted to scream, to let them know the truth, but I couldn't. They didn't deserve this. How could you use them like this? I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. David shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face tense. They don't know what's going on, Mom. But they see you've been distant. And they're starting to think you don't care. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the weight of their words. My own son, my own flesh and blood, was telling me that my absence, my refusal to be manipulated, was hurting my grandchildren. I wanted to say something back, something sharp, something that would make them understand the cruelty of what they were doing. But I couldn't find the words. Sophie smiled at me, but it wasn't a real smile. Helen, I think we all just need to understand each other's priorities. If you let go of the loan, we can move forward. We'll be a real family again. I sat back in my seat, numb. What had I become in their eyes? A burden to be dealt with? A problem to be solved with a smile, and a few empty words? Let go of the loan? I asked quietly, trying to process everything. That money was a lifeline for you. I helped you because I thought we were family. But it looks like I was wrong. The drive felt longer now. My mind was racing, my heart pounding. We were supposed to be family. But they had turned it into something else entirely. A transaction. A deal. And I had been the one, fooled into believing it was anything else. We pulled into a rest stop about an hour later. The kids jumped out, eager to stretch their legs. Sophie and David got out of the car too, leaving me alone in the back. I sat there for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened. I knew what I had to do. I sat there, in the small gas station, a cold cup of coffee in my hands. trying to process everything. The afternoon had started out as an attempt at reconciliation, a small family road trip to reconnect. But now, it felt like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. The words from David and Sophie echoed in my mind. And with each repetition, the anger inside me burned a little hotter. My hands were trembling, not just from the shock of being abandoned, but from the realization that my own flesh and blood had turned their backs on me. How had we come to this point? The kids, once so excited to spend time with me, had become distant, wrapped in their own little worlds as we drove through the mountains. Sophie and David's whispered conversations made it clear, the distance between us wasn't just emotional, it was deliberate. I watched them both, as we pulled into a rest stop along the highway. It was a quiet place, surrounded by mountains. Only a few picnic tables scattered around. The kids, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, quietly picked out candy, while Sophie and David spoke in hushed tones. "We're almost there," David announced, trying to sound cheerful. "There's an amazing viewpoint just up ahead. We can stretch our legs and take some pictures." I nodded, not sure what to say. My thoughts were elsewhere. As we arrived at the rest stop, the reality of the situation hit me hard. Sophie's voice broke the silence as she called out to the children, "Go explore a bit, but stay close." I wasn't paying much attention to the kids as they ran toward the picnic area. Instead, I focused on the mountain views, trying to regain some sense of calm. When I heard the unmistakable sound of car doors slamming shut, I turned, to see David starting the engine. Sophie was already settled in the passenger seat. My heart sank. "What are you doing?" I called out, taking a step toward them. "Mom, we've decided this isn't working out." David's voice was cold, distant. "The kids are uncomfortable with all the tension. Honestly, so are we." "What are you talking about?" "David, get out of the car." I shouted, moving closer, my voice rising with panic. Sophie leaned over from the front seat, her face expressionless. "We think it's better if you find your own way back to Phoenix. You need some time to think about what family really means." My legs felt like they were going to give out. "You're leaving me here? In the middle of nowhere?" I asked, incredulous. "There's a visitor center," Sophie replied, as if it was a reasonable explanation. "I'm sure someone will come along who can help you. Maybe this will give you some perspective on what family really means." I was frozen. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. "David, don't do this. We can work this out. Please." "We already tried, Mom," David said, his tone dismissive. "You made your choice when you chose money over family. Now, you can live with the consequences." I watched helplessly, as David drove away, leaving me standing on the side of the road with only the clothes on my back. My suitcase, my medication, my flight ticket, all of it was now disappearing down the highway. I stood there, for what felt like an eternity, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Finally, the reality of my situation hit me, like a slap in the face. I was 70 years old, stranded in a remote area. With no transportation. No way to get in touch with anyone. And a phone, with just one bar of service. I stumbled into the small gas station attached to the rest stop, my legs shaking as I tried to steady myself. A young man behind the counter, Jake, looked at me with concern as I stood there, lost in thought. He walked over, offering a cup of coffee. "Are you okay, ma'am? You look like you might need some help." I forced a smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. "My family left me here," I said simply. "I need to get back to Phoenix." Jake's face hardened with outrage. "They left you here? Like, abandoned you?" I nodded, feeling the sting of the words. His expression mirrored the shock I had seen in so many comments on social media. About elderly women, abandoned by their families. That's messed up. Hold on. Let me see what I can do. For the next hour, Jake became my lifeline. He made phone calls, looked up bus routes. Even offered me the use of the station's landline, since my cell service was so weak. My first call was to my sister, Helen, who had always been the fighter in our family. I didn't even have to say much, just hearing my voice, she knew something was wrong. "Ruth, you sound terrible." "What's happened?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. I told her everything, the loan, the manipulation, the betrayal. When I finished, there was silence on the other end. Then finally, "I'm here," Helen said, her voice a mix of anger and disbelief. "I'm just trying to process the fact that my nephew abandoned his 70-year-old mother on a mountain highway." "I don't need you to come get me," I said, trying to protect her from the situation. "The hell I don't," she shot back, her words full of fire. "Text me the address of that gas station. I'll be there in 3 hours." As I sat there waiting for Helen, I discovered something else that made my blood run cold. I checked my bank account and saw 2 recent charges on my credit card. Charges I hadn't made. One was for $500 at an electronics store. The other, $300 at a fancy restaurant. Both transactions had been made, while I was stuck at the rest stop. Stranded. Helpless. I was furious. Marcus and Sophie had taken my credit card information and were using it, while I was literally stranded. I immediately called my bank, canceled the card, and reported the fraud. The audacity, the theft, it was worse than I had ever imagined. When Helen arrived, she took one look at my face, and immediately pulled me into a fierce hug. Her anger was palpable. "Those bastards," she said without preamble, as we drove away from the gas station. "I can't believe they did this to you." "Helen, he's still my son," I said, my voice soft but firm. Helen didn't hesitate. "He's a grown man who abandoned his elderly mother on a highway. Stop making excuses for him. What are you going to do about this?" I looked out the window, staring at the mountains. But they seemed distant and cold now, like everything else. "I don't know," I said quietly. "Part of me wants to call him and demand an explanation. Part of me wants to pretend this never happened and just go home." Helen turned to me sharply. "And what about the money? The $80,000? I hesitated for a moment, thinking about everything I'd been through. "I have legal options," I said slowly. "My lawyer told me I can force the sale of the house if they don't pay." Helen's eyes met mine, full of fire. "Do it." Helen insisted I stay with her that night. She wouldn't let me fly back to Phoenix right away, saying I needed time to gather my thoughts and calm my emotions. So, we spent the evening in her cozy kitchen, sipping wine and talking until nearly midnight. It wasn't just about the abandonment anymore. It was about the lies. The manipulation. The way I had been treated as nothing more than a tool, for their convenience. "The thing that kills me," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "is that I genuinely thought this trip was their way of trying to repair things between us. I bought gifts for the kids. I made cookies. I was so hopeful." Helen's tone was blunt as she leaned forward. "Think about it, Ruth. They drove you all the way out here, had that conversation about the loan, and then dumped you in the middle of nowhere when you didn't just agree to their terms. This wasn't spontaneous. It was planned." The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The location, remote enough to leave me stranded, but not too remote to avoid potential trouble, was chosen deliberately. It was a way to separate me. To isolate me. The timing, right after I'd refused to forgive the loan, wasn't a coincidence. Sophie and David had orchestrated it. Even the way they used Lily and Sam, to plant the idea that I was the problem. It was all a calculated move. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The remote stop. The timing. The emotional manipulation, all leading to one cruel moment. I stood up from my chair, my chest tight with pressure. "I think we should head back to the car." The tension was too much to bear. The kids, sensing the shift, had grown quiet, retreating into their tablets. Their excitement from earlier, gone. We stopped in a small mountain town to refuel and grab snacks. As the kids picked out candy, I caught snippets of Sophie and David's hushed conversation. My stomach turned. They were plotting. Strategizing. And I was the target. "Okay, we're going to make one more stop before we reach the hotel," David announced, his voice full of forced cheerfulness. "There's a viewpoint just up ahead," Sophie added, her tone too casual. "We can stretch our legs and take some pictures." I didn't want to go. I didn't want any more stops. But I had no say. When we pulled into the rest stop on Highway 85, I saw it for what it was. A desolate, lonely spot. The kind of place where you'd be forgotten. The parking lot was nearly empty, save for a lone car. There were picnic tables, some vending machines, and a small visitor center that looked like it hadn't been open in years. It felt wrong. The air was too still. The mountain views, so breathtaking from a distance, now seemed cold and indifferent. "Isn't this beautiful?" Sophie's voice broke the silence, and the words stung. There was no sincerity in them, only an underlying tension I could feel, in the pit of my stomach. She turned to the kids. "Go explore a bit, but stay where we can see you." Lily and Sam ran off, their small bodies full of energy. But I couldn't focus on them. My thoughts were too heavy. I fumbled for my phone, snapping a picture, trying to pretend everything was fine. Then, I heard it. Car doors slamming shut. I looked up, only to see David starting the engine. "What are you doing?" I called out, the panic in my voice more apparent than I wanted. Sophie was already in the passenger seat. I could see Lily and Sam in the back, their faces confused, unsure of what was going on. "Marcus, what are you doing?" I shouted again, my voice rising, my chest tightening. David's face was hard. "Mom, we've decided this isn't working out," he said flatly, the words cold and distant. "The kids are uncomfortable with all the tension, and frankly, so are we." "What are you talking about?" I gasped, stumbling toward the car. "David, get out of the car." Sophie didn't even look at me. Her voice came through the roll-down window, emotionless. "We think it's better if you find your own way back to Phoenix. You need some time to think about what's really important." I felt the world spin around me. "You're leaving me here? In the middle of nowhere?" My voice cracked, as I tried to make sense of it all. "There's a visitor center, and I'm sure someone will come along to help you figure out transportation," Sophie said, like it was no big deal. "Maybe this will give you some perspective on what family really means." "David, don't do this. We can work this out. Please," I begged, my voice breaking. David didn't flinch. "We already tried, Mom," he said, his tone dismissive. "You made your choice when you chose money over family. Now, you can live with the consequences." I could see the children in the back seat, their faces pressed against the window, looking scared and confused. "Daddy, why are we leaving Grandma Ruth?" Lily's voice was soft, her innocent eyes wide. "We'll explain later, sweetheart," Sophie said sharply. "Just sit back and buckle your seatbelt." "Wait!" I shouted, but it was too late. David had already shifted the car into drive, and the SUV rolled away, leaving me standing alone, on the side of the highway. For what felt like an eternity, I stood there, frozen, as the car disappeared down the winding mountain road. My heart thudded in my chest. My suitcase, my medication, my flight ticket, all of it was gone. The reality hit hard. I was 70 years old, stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no way to get home. My phone had only 1 bar of service. I didn't even know where I was, and I had nothing but the clothes on my back. I walked into the small gas station attached to the rest stop, my hands shaking as I bought a cup of coffee. As I sat there, trying to steady my nerves, my phone buzzed with notifications. One of the messages was a post on Facebook. A story about an elderly woman abandoned at a rest stop by her family. The outrage in the comments mirrored what I was feeling. People couldn't believe someone would do that to their own mother. And then, it hit me. I wasn't going to be a victim in this story. I was going to take control. Sitting in that gas station, my coffee cooling in front of me, I started to formulate my plan. I had options. I wasn't helpless. But first, I had to get out of here. Jake, the young man behind the counter, had been watching me for a while. He came over, looking concerned. "Ma'am, are you okay? You seem like you need some help." His kindness felt like a lifeline. For a moment, I almost broke down. But I forced the tears back. I couldn't afford to fall apart. "My family left me here," I said quietly. "I need to get back to Phoenix." Jake's eyes widened. "They left you here? Like, abandoned you?" When I nodded, his face hardened. He looked furious, just like the people on Facebook. "That's messed up. Let me see what I can do." Jake got on the phone, called his manager, checked bus routes. Even offered me the use of the landline. I could feel something shifting inside me, something strong. My first call was to Helen. The moment she picked up, she knew something was wrong. "Ruth, you sound terrible." "What's happened?" she asked. I told her everything, about the loan, the lies, the abandonment. The silence on the other end stretched on. For a moment, I thought we'd lost the connection. "Helen, are you there?" I asked. "I'm here," she said, her voice tight with fury. "I'm just trying to process the fact that my nephew abandoned his 70-year-old mother on a mountain highway." I shook my head. "Helen, I don't need you to come get me." "The hell I don't," she shot back, her voice full of fire. "Text me the address. I'll be there in 3 hours." Helen insisted I stay the night with her in Colorado, despite my desire to fly back to Phoenix immediately. She said I needed time to process everything that had happened. So, we sat in her cozy kitchen, the hours slipping by unnoticed, as we shared a bottle of wine and talked until almost midnight. Every word out of my mouth, every memory that I relived, made the truth clearer. They had used me. And I wasn't going to let them continue. "The thing that kills me," I confessed, my voice heavy, "is that I thought this trip, this whole thing, was their way of trying to fix what was broken between us. I bought gifts for the kids, I baked cookies. I had hope." Helen didn't sugarcoat it. "Think about it, Ruth. They picked you up, drove you out to the middle of nowhere, pushed the loan conversation, and then dumped you when you didn't give in. This wasn't random. This was planned." The more I thought about it, the more I realized how right she was. The place they chose, the remote stretch of road where they knew I couldn't get help quickly. They had manipulated everything, from the timing, to the way they'd used Lily and Sam, to make it seem like I was the one in the wrong. The whole situation had been about breaking me down. I stood up, the weight of everything pressing down on me. "I think we should head back to the car." The rest of the afternoon drive was filled with tension. The kids, sensing the change in energy, grew quieter. They barely asked any questions and just zoned out with their tablets. Sophie and David exchanged whispered words. A conversation I wasn't part of, but felt all too well. When we stopped for gas and snacks, I saw the cracks more clearly. They were still talking, their whispers too sharp, too pointed. When we got back on the road, David casually announced that we'd be making one more stop before the hotel. "There's a viewpoint just ahead. Let's stretch our legs and take some pictures." We pulled into the rest stop, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The place was desolate, just a small visitor center, some vending machines, and a few picnic tables scattered around. It was too quiet. Too isolated. "Isn't this beautiful?" Sophie said as we all climbed out of the car, but the words felt hollow to me. She told the kids to go explore a little, but I stayed close to the car. I didn't trust it. The air around us felt wrong. As I fiddled with my phone, taking a picture of the mountains, I heard the car doors slam shut. I turned to see David starting the engine. "What are you doing?" I called out, panic rising in my chest. Sophie was already in the passenger seat, and through the window, I saw Lily and Sam looking confused in the back. "Marcus, what are you doing?" I shouted again, voice trembling. David's face was colder than I'd ever seen it. "Mom, we've decided this isn't working. The kids are uncomfortable with the tension, and frankly, so are we." "What are you talking about?" My heart was racing now. "David, get out of the car. We think it's better if you find your own way back to Phoenix. You need some time to think about what's really important," Sophie said, her voice flat, no remorse in it at all. I couldn't comprehend what was happening. "You're leaving me here? In the middle of nowhere?" "There's a visitor center," Sophie said dismissively, "and I'm sure someone will come along and help you figure out transportation. Maybe this will give you some perspective on what family really means." I stepped forward, desperate now. "David, don't do this. We can work this out." David's eyes didn't soften. "We already tried, Mom. You made your choice when you chose money over family. Now you can live with the consequences." I saw Lily press her face to the window, her expression full of confusion. "Daddy, why are we leaving Grandma Ruth?" Sophie snapped, "We'll explain later, sweetheart. Just sit back and buckle your seatbelt." "Wait!" I shouted as David put the car in drive. But it didn't matter. The car started rolling, moving away from me. They were leaving. Taking my grandchildren with them. I stood frozen as they disappeared down the road, the world around me spinning. My suitcase, my medication, my flight ticket, all of it was gone. Taken with them. And I was left behind, in a place that felt like it was 100 miles from anywhere. Minutes passed before I could move, my mind still struggling to process what had just happened. I was 70 years old, alone, stranded, with no way to get home. My phone barely had a signal. I walked into the small gas station attached to the rest stop and bought a coffee with trembling hands. As I sat, trying to steady my nerves, my phone buzzed again, a Facebook story. Another woman. Another highway. Another mother, left behind. But I wasn't going to be her. This wasn't where my story ended. This was where it began. One day, I received a letter from Mark. I hadn't heard from him since his arrest, and part of me had hoped that I would never hear from him again. But there it was, sitting in my mailbox. I opened the letter slowly, unsure of what to expect. It was filled with apologies, with regrets, and with pleas for forgiveness. He said that he had changed, that he understood the depth of his actions, and that he hoped we could repair our relationship in the future. I read the letter once, then twice, before I folded it up and set it aside. I wasn't ready to deal with it yet. The pain was still too fresh, too raw. And I knew that even if he had changed, it didn't change the fact that he had destroyed everything I had believed about family. It didn't change the fact that he had used me, and abandoned me, when I needed him most. Instead of responding to Mark, I focused on the family I had now. Helen, Emma, and Tyler. They were my future, and that future was filled with possibilities. It was filled with love, with support, and with the knowledge that we would always have each other. A few weeks later, things had begun to settle into a new rhythm. Emma and Tyler had adjusted to their new home, and Helen and I were becoming experts at balancing the responsibilities of guardianship with the joys of being grandmothers. Despite the laughter filling our home once again, there was still the shadow of the past that hovered over me, something I couldn't escape, no matter how hard I tried. The emotional toll of everything that had happened was still fresh. Marcus and Rebecca had been people I once trusted, people I loved deeply. Yet, their betrayal had shattered that trust in ways I could never have imagined. Every day, I found myself reflecting on their actions, trying to piece together the reasons behind what they did. It was a constant struggle, but there were moments, small victories, when hope began to spark. A hope that, with time, the pain would lessen. One morning, I was having coffee in the garden when Emma came outside, her sketchbook in hand. "Grandma Ruth," she said shyly, "I made something for you." She handed me the sketchbook, and on the page was a beautiful drawing of our house, the garden, and the three of us. Me, Helen, and Tyler, sitting on the porch, smiling. Tears welled in my eyes. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I said, pulling her into a hug. "Thank you." She looked up at me, her big eyes full of sincerity. "We're safe here, right? They can't take us back." My heart ached, knowing that a child so young had been burdened with that fear. "No, darling," I whispered, holding her close. "You're safe. No one is going to hurt you ever again." Later that evening, Helen and I sat in the living room, sipping tea and listening to the kids play in the next room. "You've given them a second chance," Helen said softly. "And you've given yourself one, too." I smiled. "It doesn't feel like I've done anything special. I just couldn't let them suffer for what their parents did." Helen reached over and took my hand. "That's what makes you special, Ruth. After everything, you still chose love." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this point. The betrayal, the abandonment, the heartache. But also, the healing, the rediscovery of purpose, the strength I didn't know I had. And as I drifted off to sleep, I made a quiet promise to myself. That I would not let bitterness define me. That I would not allow pain to take root where hope had begun to bloom. In the months that followed, I started volunteering at a local community center, one that supported elderly individuals who had been financially or emotionally abused by their families. It was something I never imagined I'd be doing. But after everything I'd endured, I felt compelled to help others who had walked a path like mine. I led small group discussions, offered guidance, and most of all, listened. The stories I heard were heartbreaking: women and men abandoned, manipulated, taken advantage of by their own children or caregivers. Each story chipped away at the belief that I was alone. That what happened to me was rare. It wasn't. We were many, and our voices had been quiet for too long. One day, after a support meeting, an older gentleman named Harold approached me. He was thin, his face weathered, but his eyes were kind. "Ruth," he said, "I just wanted to thank you. Hearing your story, it gave me the courage to finally speak up about what my son's been doing to me." I squeezed his hand gently. "You're not alone anymore, Harold. None of us are." That moment, more than any other, made me realize something important. What I had been through wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. One filled with purpose. I wasn't just rebuilding my own life, I was helping others do the same. The foundation was officially launched 3 months later. We called it the Brooks Foundation for Dignity and Justice, a name that carried the weight of my past, and the promise of a better future for others. The launch event was small, just a few close friends, supporters, and community members. Helen stood beside me, beaming with pride. Emma and Tyler sat in the front row, their eyes wide with wonder. As I stepped up to the podium to speak, my hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the enormity of the moment. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice steady. "This foundation is more than just a response to what happened to me, it's a response to what's happening to too many others, in silence. We're here to shine a light, to give a voice to those who've been silenced, and to offer hope where there's been none." The applause that followed wasn't loud. But it was genuine. It was the kind of applause that comes from people who understand. Who feel what you're saying in their bones. Over the next several months, the foundation grew. We held workshops, legal clinics, and community outreach programs. We partnered with local agencies, senior homes, even law enforcement, to identify and protect those at risk. I found myself working harder than I ever had. But I had never felt more alive. The pain of the past hadn't vanished. But it had transformed into something powerful. One evening, after a long day at the foundation, I returned home to find Helen baking in the kitchen, the smell of cinnamon and apples filling the air. Emma was at the table, sketching in her notebook, and Tyler was sprawled on the floor with Daisy curled beside him. It was an ordinary evening, yet something about it felt extraordinary. I paused in the doorway, taking it all in. This was the life I had fought so hard for. Later that night, as I tucked the kids into bed, Tyler looked up at me with sleepy eyes. "Grandma Ruth," he murmured, "are you happy now?" His question caught me off guard. I smiled, brushing his hair back. "Yes, sweetheart. I really am." And I meant it. Not because everything had gone back to the way it was, but because I had found a new way forward. One that was filled with purpose, peace, and love. Weeks passed, and our foundation continued to grow. We started receiving letters, emails, phone calls from people across the country who had heard my story. Some were survivors. Some were still trapped. All of them were searching for hope. And with every story I heard, every person we helped, I felt the fire inside me burn brighter. One day, I received an email that brought me to tears. "Dear Ruth," it began, "I heard your speech on the radio, and I just wanted to say thank you. My daughter stole everything from me, my savings, my home, my dignity. I thought I was alone. But hearing your story gave me the courage to speak up. I'm getting help now. Thank you for reminding me that my life still matters." I read those words over and over. And I knew this was my calling. Months later, I found myself back on the road, not alone this time, but with Helen and the kids. We were headed to a national conference on elder justice, where I had been invited to speak as the keynote guest. As we drove past open fields and winding highways, I thought about how far I had come. How far we had come. Helen reached over, squeezing my hand. "Nervous?" I shook my head, smiling. "No, just grateful." The auditorium was packed. Elder advocates, survivors, lawmakers, students. When I stepped onto the stage, the spotlight felt warm, not intimidating. "My name is Ruth Brooks," I began, "and I am a survivor. Not just of elder abuse, but of silence. Of shame. Of betrayal by the people I loved most. But I'm also a witness to the resilience that lives in all of us, even when everything we believed in falls apart. I was abandoned. Forgotten. Left at the side of a highway with nothing but a phone and my faith. But I didn't let that be the end of my story. And neither should you." Tears filled the eyes of many in the room. But there were also nods, of understanding, of recognition. "If you've ever been made to feel small, disposable, invisible, know this," I said, my voice steady, "you are none of those things. You matter. Your story matters." The standing ovation that followed was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Not for me, but for what we all stood for. Justice. Dignity. Hope. After the speech, people lined up to talk to me, not just about my journey, but about theirs. Survivors hugged me. Younger advocates asked how they could help. And somewhere in that crowd, I felt the presence of every person who had ever been silenced, standing tall beside me. Later that night, back in the hotel room, I stood by the window, watching the city lights twinkle below. Helen was already asleep, the kids tucked into their beds, exhausted from the day. But I couldn't sleep. I thought about everything that had brought me here. The pain. The betrayal. The silence that once consumed me. And then I thought about the letters. The survivors. The faces I saw today, filled with strength, not sorrow. I whispered softly to myself. "You did it, Ruth. Not just surviving, but rising. Rebuilding. Reclaiming every piece of the woman I was, and more. I wasn't just a mother. Or a grandmother. Or a victim. I was a voice. A force. A light, for others still trapped in the dark." And in that quiet hotel room, with the sound of soft breathing around me, and the stars peeking through the glass. I finally let myself cry. But they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of peace. Of freedom. Of coming home, to myself.